Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are on the globe. I'm pleased to welcome you for this third session of the Executive Training course for the Policymakers on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is organized by the UN Office for Sustainable Development, known as UNLSD, based in Incheon, South Korea. This year again, the Executive Training course focuses on the forthcoming high-level political forum, also referred to as HLPF, that will take place in July 2021, where the discussions will revolve around sustainable development, sustainable and resilient recovery, also from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the presentations and discussions on the HLPF, the voluntary national reviews we saw yesterday, and then selection of Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, that will go under in-depth review during the HLPF next July. We hope that this training course will help you understand better and actively take part in the implementation and review process of the SDGs in your own countries. I hope you could follow the two first sessions on Monday and Tuesday, where we looked at SDG 3 on good health and well-being, and on Tuesday on SDG 8, yesterday on decent work and economic growth. If you missed one or the two sessions, I mean, you can also see them because we recorded them. We record all the sessions as we go, so you can find them on our website. And I believe that my colleagues will give you the web page address on the chat box. Tonight we'll continue with the presentations and discussions on SDG 12, responsible sustainable consumption and production. Before introducing the moderator tonight, I would like to request that you please raise your questions through the Q&A panel box, and where you can address the questions to all the panel members or individuals. I've seen, I think that in many times you participants put their questions or comments in the chat box, and then it doesn't go directly to the speakers, to the panelists. So I would like to ask you to do it to the Q&A panel. You can also put them, if it's a general comment, as well in the chat box if it's a question. But I mean, ideally would go through reach the panelist, please. So that was my technical part. This is very important because it helps us to work well throughout the session. I'd like to let you know that tonight the session will be moderated by Ms. Lichia Sanya-Yu. She's professor in organization development and institutional learning. She's president of this Center for Socioeconomic Development, or CSEND. And Professor Sanya-Yu has over 20 years of experience as an advisor to governments and international organizations, and for organizational development and reform of public administrations. She holds a doctorate in educational psychology from Indiana University, and she's a former associate professor at the Chinese Culture University, Chinese Taipei. She was a postdoctoral fellow at the Columbia University in organizational psychology. Professor Sanya-Yu also was very instrumental in organizing this training course, and she is our guide with the course throughout the week. I'll give her the floor now, and she will introduce the topics that will be discussed tonight by the very interesting speakers who are scholars, professionals, and practitioners who will share their knowledge and their experience with us tonight. Professor Yu, Lichia, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Darogong, for your kind introduction. And this has been a great pleasure working with you to put this program together with you and also with the support of Raymond Center, so that tonight we will be able to gather such a group of distinguished speakers and lectures, similarly to the previous two days. And I'm very pleased that we have this opportunity to address one of the most challenging items of SDGs in terms of the sort of the ecosystem security related to how can we sort of reduce the use of raw material and deterioration of the environment, and also other implications in terms of individual lifestyles and also business behavior, as well as the business model. So let me just sort of say, share my slides and say a few words before I go further on that. And Dr. Jean Daragon, as always, as the man behind the screen. So I wanted to sort of make sure that if everybody also know a little bit about you as a specialist, senior expert on sustainable development, and with plenty of personal experience in this topic, in this domain, and also as well as doing recovery work in different countries. And Dr. Daragon has been serving the United Nations for many years, and now leading, supporting Mr. Park and inside of the UNLSD in Korea. So let me say, even though most of you probably know already the mission of UNLSD, its mission is to contribute to build, exchange, and facilitate the use of knowledge. And I think, SDG 12 probably is the most, suffers most in terms of knowledge deficit. And so it is very significant today we have the opportunity in the context of the coming HLPF to address SDG 12. And at the same time, I think, it's very important contribution from UNOSD is specializes in mapping, assessing, and improving the exchange of knowledge resources. So that, and also supporting the conducting research and capacity development in different countries. So I think, UNOSD need to be critical knot in the whole global network of promoting, accelerating the SDG progress and attainment. The ETC is intended to provide policymakers in central and subnational governments with knowledge, skills, and tools for the implementation. But it also supports the member states to gear up for a decade of action and delivery for SDGs. Because what we know is that 1/3 of the time has passed, and we have not really reached, globally, the 1/3 of the milestones. So what is the objective specifically for this week and for this day? One is about raising awareness about the key issues within SDGs. We cannot cover everything within each individual SDG goals, but we picked critical matters to address in the short time we have. Second, we want to share information and experiences in tackling some of these issues, and also reflect on, what the country's effort in making progress and overcome barriers. Well, how do they do it, what they have done, and what they consider to be critical. And of course, it is important to highlight the Vienna process with great participation from member states. It shows that it has turned into a process for continuing improvement and for part of the national transformation dynamics. And we hope that this message is clear to everyone. It is not just about a report, but it actually is coming together at the global level. We think together, we reflect, and hopefully we learn from this experience so that acceleration of SDG improved attainment could be achieved. Dr. Aragon already mentioned that the way to interact is through the chat and question and answer, and please leave your questions in the question answer box so that we can receive those messages. And at the end, before you leave the session, we have set up a small mechanism to get to collect some feedback in order to improve our own design and process. So please share with us your thoughts and answers. It's very simple. There are 7 questions and space for some open-ended comments. So this today I'll be serving both as the person who has been the so to speak chief architect of the day, but also I would moderate the process. So I will now switch on to my sorry, I have to do something. And now I would like to take a few minutes to introduce today's topic. SDG 12 is about ensuring sustainable consumption and production pattern. And we would like to address this complex issue that combine individual behavior, society norms and culture with business model and business conduct in one compact topic. Are you seeing my slides?
No, we don't see the slides.
No.
Okay. All right. Now I see
Yes.
John, so I know that I'm there. Okay. The 3 topics that we will address today will be looking at the circular economy and how does that link with the SDG 12. And then we will look 2 concrete country examples. One in great extent because Professor Lee has done a tremendous job of summarizing more than 15 years of experience in Korea. And then we also would have a last piece from from Madame Casimiro in terms of what is happening or has happened, and also link it to the VNR in the Philippines. Let me just say a few words as a way to introduce. And I think we have continued to use natural resources in a way which is not sustainable. And you can see the footprint of our man-made behavior has increased. And this has been shown in the 2020 UNDP Human Development Report, and its title is The Frontier of the New Age, the Anthropocene age that is imposing on our ecosystem. And then also Professor Lee would also address the questions about the electronic waste, because this has become most important part of our modern life. We would not be able to have this meeting without these electronic gadgets, tools, and also infrastructure that supports this interconnectivity. And that is a great challenge. How can we continue to benefit the modern technology, but at the same time mindful of our living environment? And so you could see that also in terms of reducing carbon, we have not really able to stop or switch off from the fossil fuel subsidies that has been contributing to sort of certain waste and unconscious use of energy. Although things are getting better. And so what will be the post-COVID look like? This is from the UN. It suggests that we have to take all these things into consideration as part of our development plan. Very quickly, if I just want to highlight a little bit, in terms of the resource consumption. If you look at in 1917, basically our production and lifestyle, it consumes 1 Earth in terms of its regeneration capability. By 2020, now we're using 1.6 Earth. And so that is a new term, has been being used quite widely now. It's called Earth Overshoot Day. What does Earth Overshoot Day mean? It marks the date when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. So how do we live on borrowed time, so to speak, or borrowed resources? Basically, we are doing it by liquidating stocks of ecological resources and accumulating waste. And so we are living already into not only about what we can regenerate today, but it's already in the future. We're borrowing the future, and today our sort of a date of that borrowing starts on the August 22. And compared to 2019, the borrow day starts in July. So we already even though we had the benefits a little bit, I hope we will, slowing this process down, but it's very worrying. And specifically, if you look at wildlife, from 1917 to 2016, it tremendously declined, and then also other wild animals, sharing this planet is also suffering. If you pay attention to the dark red, and that's what man-made consequences onto these other forms of well-being. Not human, the beings. And it is through habitat degradation of the living space for birds, for reptiles, and amphibians, mammals, and fish. And I would say COVID is a direct manifestation of that proximity of man and animals coming to that. We'll start to lose the barriers in between. So with this note, I just wanted to quote this Global Sustainable Report, which is published every 4 years. So this version is 2019, and the title of it is Science for Achieving SD. And if you look at the SDG 12, on the top, what you're having, green is within 5%, we're going to reach the target. And the red means not most behind, and orange is negative trend. And unfortunately, according to the scientists, we are in the negative trend, and in some other countries, basically haven't got started or totally behind. And as we know, the world is indivisible, and this is requiring effort of all of us, all countries. So with this note, I would like to introduce the speaker of today, Professor Walter Stile. Professor Walter Stile, he is known because of his pioneering, pathfinding contribution to the discussion about circular economy. It started in the 90s already. So, and he has been, professor, continued to be a professor at the University of Surrey. At the same time, he's the founder director of the Product Life Institute. His most recent book is a guidebook, User's Guide for Circular Economy, and published in 2019. Besides this, he has also been very influential in the policy arena. He has been a long-term member of the Club of Rome. As you know, that is one of the most influential policy think tank, but also he has been a senior research fellow at the Circular Economy Research Center of the École de Point Business School. So with this few words, I would like to give the floor to Professor Stile to start his lecture today.
Thank you, Licha. So I have to find my presentation, which should come up. Okay. I don't know how to. Doesn't matter. You can read it. So I'll go on. 20 minutes. It's 12:21. So I'm going to talk about circular economy and what it means in different contexts. We have to distinguish between goods that are consumed, such as food, fodder, energy, water, and drinks. And there the sustainable production is very important. It's like a shower. I call it shower economics because it goes like a shower, the water goes through, and once it's consumed, it's gone. Then what I call the bathtub economics is the circular economy of durable goods. And here now the important thing is no longer the production, but the use of the goods, the stock, like the water in a jacuzzi or in a bathtub. The key thing is the intelligent use over longest possible time of the stock of goods and maintaining the quality and quantity of this stock. We measure, of course, the production, the GDP. We don't really have an idea of the stocks or the quality and quantity of stocks, and we have an estimate of the outflow.
Professor Style,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you can simply press F5 on your keyboard to make it to a full screen mode.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So next slide, the origin of circularity. Nature, I look into those more detail, but nature, anything, any material that is natural, then the human behavior, good husbandry, careful management of using resources, in the old proverbial expression, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. And infrastructure, which is designed for durability. So nature is circular by evolution. There is no waste in nature. Used resources are food for others. The conclusion of that, all waste is man-made, and therefore it's our responsibility. Infrastructure is functional, designed for durability. There is no fashion in infrastructure. It's often in public ownership. It's often also neglected, the operation and maintenance, because public authorities are short of funds. It may become part of cultural heritage, like this Roman aqueduct in France. And of course, infrastructure normally is local and immobile. Then the early man-made objects were made from natural materials, and stewardship or husbandry was very high, because otherwise we were faced, or people were faced with poverty and scarcity. And the discarded objects or the used objects were within nature's circularity, as long as the absorption capacity was not too big. Then we look at this shower, the circular economy of biocycles, the shower economy of consumer goods, is based on a sustainable use of natural resources. So the the production, and an efficient harvest management. It's based on waste prevention in the production of food, fodder, energy, water, and drinks, and their distribution. So the smart consumption management should prevent these products or produces being lost, wasted in storage and use. Very often we can use the natural processes, for example, in the organic waste treatment in natural biotopes. They need a lot of space, but they are as efficient as expensive wastewater treatment plants built with bricks and mortar and pumps. And we have to become more innovative in preventing food waste, in this case, between the farm and the user, the shop. So Tata Steel has had, I think, a very good idea of developing a mobile canning line concept so that tomatoes, in this case, can be processed at the farm and canned, and then they have much longer shelf life than the fresh fruit, or in this case tomatoes, and they give farmers an additional revenue. Now, this situation fundamentally changed in the mid-last century with the Anthropocene, which is now dated at the first nuclear bomb, 1945, because the Anthropocene unleashed the scientific progress in physics, in chemistry, and metallurgy. These new materials, which are synthetic or scientific materials, are unknown to nature. Nature cannot cope with it. So therefore, they impose a man-made producer responsibility at the end of their use. So we have to forget that the producer sells goods or materials at the point of sale and then is out of the game. The producer has to be, or the producer's liability has to be engaged throughout the product life of materials and products. And there is also a quantitative point of view, because in 2020, the human-made mass or anthropogenic mass has surpassed the global living biomass. And this anthropogenic mass doubles roughly every 20 years. So it's like the global footprint or the Earth Overshoot Day. This is another indication that we have to find ways of exploiting existing wealth and limit additional new production as much as we can, because it is simply not sustainable. So how can we exploit existing wealth? And this is where the circular economy, the bathtub circular economy comes in. The sustainable use of materials and objects in tech cycles to maintain quantity and quality of stocks. And these stocks include natural capital, human capital, cultural capital, financial capital, manufactured capital, where I put the emphasis on materials and objects, but also immaterial assets such as embodied water and CO2 emissions in production that are now embodied in the finished products. So a mature or bathtub circular economy is a fully closed loop. There is the product use phase, which is the key, the area of ARP. It's reuse, repair, remanufacturing. This is the key because if we can maintain the utility and the value of objects and infrastructure buildings for as long as possible, then we don't use any additional resources. So we need innovation, how to better do this, such as spareless repairs, remanufacture. But in any case, at some point we come to the point of the end of service life of these objects. And this is where now the area of D for delinking, which is very little developed, becomes important, because we have to transform these end-of-life objects into as pure as new resources, molecules and atoms that can be reused in production. So we don't want waste or downcycling. We have to maintain the quality and purity of these molecules and atoms in this area of D. And then we go into the next production. Now, in order to improve this whole circular economy, we need novel systems, materials, and components that go into the production process and that also go into upgrading the products in use. It's important to realize that the bathtub circular economy is local, cultural, and it differs between regions. Developing countries must be able to create stocks of infrastructure and objects, in other words, to fill up the bathtub, because only then the circular economy can really work. Industrialized countries is the other end. They have societies of abundance. They must learn to repair and upgrade qualitatively the existing stocks. So not replacing existing stocks with new goods, but maintaining the value and utility of the existing stocks. All nations can develop circular sciences. We need circular energy, chemistry, metallurgy that go into the production process, and developing regional workshops that exploit local skill pools and create local jobs through the virtuous loops of the circular economy. Regional and cultural also means understanding the underlying local issues and especially science and traditions. For example, in India, you have these mutkas made of brass. It's brass pots that were traditionally used to collect and store water. And then they were replaced by modern materials, plastic, metal, aluminum. And it turned out that the people got sick because one thing, if brass is made of copper and another metal, and copper fades into the water in very small doses and kills the bacteria. So you can store water in a mutka for a week or more, and the water will still be perfect quality. If you do the same with plastic or aluminum containers, you can no longer drink the water after the first day. So very often the traditional ancient way of doing things was basically the correct one, the sustainable one. So the circular economy is about using, not consuming regional stocks. One example is the UNIDO's chemical leasing initiative, which tells chemical manufacturers to rent the molecules to keep control and ownership over the molecules and take them back. And the same thing goes for selling objects. Rent objects instead of selling them, because then the manufacturer has an interest in extending the service life of objects. He is the owner of the objects, and therefore he will profit from reuse, repair, remanufacture, upgrades. We talked about smartphones before the meeting started. If the manufacturer rents smartphones and gets them back when you no longer want it, he will not go into recycling. He will upgrade it technologically and repair it or remanufacture it so he can rent it again, because then he is profiting from the circular economy. And the circular economy is also offering, that's where we move into the performance economy, selling performance instead of goods. Then it's also for manufacturers profitable to exploit sufficiency, create value from nothing. For example, green vineyards. Don't use chemicals, but use sheep. Waterless urinals. You don't need any piping or water, but you have to install a container system, and then the urea that you recover, the urine, is actually a very expensive chemical that is used in agriculture and chemicals. Plus energy buildings, plowing at night is applied biology. If you plow at night, you have 90% less weeds. So you have less chemicals, less if you do it by handwork. So again, understanding nature, living with nature. The social benefits of the circular economy, I can show you with my car from 1969. The longer you use something like an automobile, the more money is spent on labor. After 30 years, all the monies I have spent was for local labor to maintain, service, repair the car. So obviously, service life extension is not of interest for the manufacturer, because he gets less and less of the cake. But it's interesting for local labor, local workshops, and the owner, because it's cheaper than buying a new car every 10 years. Now, policymakers' motivation. Why should policymakers be interested in this? Because a circular economy creates resilience, and it demands a caring attitude, a stewardship attitude by the user. The former consumer is now a user. How can policymakers help a circular economy? Abolish labor taxes on workers, because all the activities in maintaining natural human culture and manufactured assets are labor intensive. So therefore, don't punish these activities compared to manufacturing. Then favor public procurement of systems performance. Don't public procurement should buy results, not products. One example is the bridge to the Incheon airport that was built by a private manufacturer, and this toll bridge is exploited by this fleet manager. So, because the public authorities decided they didn't want to build a bridge, they wanted somebody else to pay a bridge and carry the cost and the responsibility. Then policymakers' actions promote vocational training for repair and maintenance workers, because manufacturing industry is not doing that. They want people that are good in their manufacturing processes. The linear industrial economy has no interest in training people for repair or for creating local repair shops. And finally, promote circular legislation, such as the right to repair. The right to repair is not in present legislation. It's only now coming into in Europe and the US. But when you buy a product, you take the ownership and the liability. Therefore, it is your belonging, and you should have the right to repair without asking the manufacturer if you're allowed to. And the equivalent, a full producer liability. If nobody wants a product anymore, then it should simply be returned back to the producer, because he knows how he built it and how to take it apart. The waste that ends up with the municipalities don't know how to do this. So who takes the decisions in the circular economy? It's the policymakers that make the framework conditions, and it's the owner users. You and me, all of us, looking after our belongings, having them repaired or remanufactured or give them to somebody else if we no longer want them. More details in this book, which Ligia mentioned. Thank you for listening. My time is up.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Steyer, and for a very fascinating, succinct, summarized version of what is circular economy and what can we do in terms of sustainable production and how does it link to the consumption. So, before I open the floor, I just wanted to show something, because I think your presentation really highlighted the interconnectivity and integrated approach of all the SDG goals together. May I have the possibility to share briefly in just one page of my slide? Okay. And I think today, after your lecture, this particular chart that was published and prepared by David LeBlanc, who's a member of the UNLSD, and he looked at the different targets and indicators and goals as an integrated network. And in this map, it shows that the SDG 12, sustainable consumption and production, it links to many of the other SDG goals, such as, so your lecture really shows how can we sort of use pushing on the SDG 12 as a way to promote progress in others. So with this said, I would like to actually open up by asking one question. Let me see how I can stop sharing. Okay. My question is one small one, which is about what you suggested in terms of delinking, because I think in your desktop model, that was the last part, and you said that's the delinking. Could you give us a little bit more examples in terms of about delinking? I assume some of the delinking will be painful, others will be less. So maybe that would be a good place to start in terms of going a little bit back, deeper. And the second question, I put it out on the table as well. You mentioned that we have to, when we look at the destruction of manufacturing capital, we should need to start thinking about producer responsibility and their liability. So as of course you are aware in Geneva that the UN guiding principles on business and human rights is very much talking about this since the work by Professor Reggie. So I was just wondering, from your experience, what have you observed and how does actually producers trying to do this? So my questions are two. One is about delinking, the other is about taking responsibility. What are the good examples they have done?
Okay, delinking is easy with, for example, nylon. All the engineering plastics that are polymers can be depolymerized. And then you get the monomer and you can use it again. You get the pure monomer, all the additives fall out. But you cannot do that with cheap plastics. So we should only use the engineering plastics because they can live in a circular chemistry. But a lot of research is going into developing new monomers that can then be reused, polymerized, and there is some progress also for cheaper plastics. A lot of universities are working on that. Another thing is if you recycle steel, you always have a bit of copper in the steel. And every time you recycle, this copper accumulates. Once the copper content has reached 3%, you can no longer really use the steel for any high performance applications. And somebody, I've forgotten at which university or company, has now developed a process to separate the copper in the steel remanufacturing. And then you can reuse the steel for much longer times. And one of the biggest consumers of materials and therefore producers of waste is buildings, concrete. So there we are also making progress in reusing progress basically by smashing it up. There are the different ways to produce aggregate that can be reused in what we call remanufactured concrete, so that we don't, if we demolish a building, it doesn't go to landfill, but it is used to produce the aggregate for new concrete. But there are more examples. It's one of the really fast-moving fields. Now, your second question, the extended producer responsibility, the difference between producer responsibility and producer liability is that producer responsibility is something that will be dealt in the sustainability report of companies, but no action normally follows. Producer liability is that this will appear in the financial statements of the company. And the financial statements, in the financial statements, it's appears as a liability, as something that the company owes. So therefore, financial investments shy away from any liability where the company cannot put an amount nor a date because they don't know when they will have to take back these things. So that's why I stress the full producer liability, because then companies will immediately start to change because they don't want these liabilities on their balance sheet.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a very good answer. I have actually from participants another interesting question. Let me just read it off. Very interesting presentation. In our country, we have issues with the production cycle stemming from drought and severe rainfall events, leading to scarcity and gluts. Utilizing some of these methods would significantly smooth out our supply side issues, but how affordable are these approaches for developing countries? I assume the question was related to two. One is about use of water, another is agriculture and daily life.
Yes. Well, there are two overarching resources that I didn't specifically mention. One is water, because without water, there is no life and no food. The other one is people. Without people, there is no economy and no society. So before everything, we should look after human capital and natural capital, and especially water. So we shouldn't waste water and we shouldn't waste human labor, which is, we should give people preference in employing them in production activities, what the circular economy does on a local scale, and we should be very careful with the way we deal with water. So we should avoid wastage, and in agriculture, of course, let's put it this way. Things like cotton. We should tell people that in a pair of jeans, there is 11 tons of water, 10 tons to produce the cotton, and 1 ton to produce the jeans. So if they double the service life of their jeans, they preserve 11 tons of water, 11,000 liters of water. And it's the same with many other products. Also with building, concrete uses a lot of water. But these are what I call the embodied resources. So we have to start to measure these resources that are later embodied in products, objects, and tell the user who buys products that if you preserve these objects, you save water, huge amounts of water, and you save energy, you save CO2 emissions, because most people simply don't know these links.
Well, thank you for a very extensive response to this also last question. And I think one of the movement, at least, is talking about true cost. So at this moment, we have not factored in the environmental resources cost in the production, and also countries tend to continue to subsidize for good reasons, because the people at the bottom of the pyramid might not be able to afford the clean water, nor some countries have not really done the infrastructure development to deliver clean water, for example. So there are many complex issues actually in this conversation. And I'd now like to turn over to Professor Sung Wee Lee. I hope I was told that's how I can pronounce through Google. So I hope it's correct. So may I also just Professor Lee has done some very interesting, substantial research, especially looking at the development process of how does Korea moving, after the very difficult the war, the North and the South, and reach the peace. And then they started to use waste management as a way to actually to save on the use of resources. As you know, that because Korea is not a natural resource rich country. But over the years, I think through the accumulation of knowledge and research, they have started looking at the recycle aspect of the process, not only just about waste, but many other materials as well, and move into the circular economy. So Professor Lee, we are with great pleasure to have you with us tonight as an eminent expert in this topic in your country, but also in many of the related sort of technical areas. So the floor is yours, and we welcome your lecture.
Okay, thank you, Jia. My name is Sung-hee Lee, working in Gyeonggi University. And I joined to Gyeonggi University in 1994. And today I'd like to talk about the sustainable practice of waste management for the circular economy for Korean experience. I'd like to emphasize the practice. And practice is very important in circular economy. Even though it's small case, small item, it's okay. And it is starting to practice is very important. So I like to emphasize for that. Next, please. And this is table of contents, introduction in Korea, and concept of circular economy and waste management in Korea, and emphasize the sustainable practice of waste toward a circular economy. And finally, I'd like to make a summary for that. Next, please. First one is introduction. As Risha mentioned, Korea is not this country for the resources and energy, but it's not true. Korea is poor country of natural energy or natural resources. We import almost 94% of primary energy. So total cost of import in Korea is 535 billion US dollars. 52% is for raw materials. So that is the reason in Korea we push the recycling, circular economy, renewable, and that is very important in Korea. So we developed the technology for 30 years. Not 10 years, not 20 years. That is almost 30 years we developed the recycling technology. The generation amount of waste is increased 346,000 tons a day, 2007. That is increased to 446,000 tons a day, 2018. In the period of 17 years, we increased this much. So we must use the recycling, the waste as the secondary resources. The Framework Act on Resource Circulation was enforced to promote recycling in 2018. That is the new regulation. It's combined with the circular economy. It is desirable to realize resource circulation after safe treatment of hazardous waste. So if there is no hazardous waste, no hazardous materials, everything can be recycled on the Framework Act. In circular economy, manufacturers design products to be reusable and sustainable practice based on the 3 R's are key issues. So a lot of responsibility belongs to manufacturers. Next one, please. So I think that everybody understands the concept of circular economy. Licia already mentioned the circular economy model, production and consumption, and the same related to SDG 12 based on the 3 R's. And necessity and benefit. I think that everybody understands that. Oh, excuse me, people, okay. This one is the raw materials going to design, and Professor Walter mentioned about the design in the manufacturers and production and distribution and consumption and collection and recycling. So this is a circle, but every step got the barriers, obstacles. So how can they solve these barriers? In the design, production, and recycling, every step got the barriers. That is the key. So how can you solve these barriers? Next one, please. There is 7 key elements of circular economy, from design for the future to collaborate to create joint value. This is the solution of the barriers, obstacles. It depends on the condition or situation of countries. How can they take out the elements? So some countries got the different elements, some countries got the another different element to solve those barriers towards circular economy. Next one, please. So Professor Walter already mentioned the SDG, and Licia also mentioned about that. The major goal is the SDG 12. But the Licia already mentioned about the integrated connection. But interconnection between these sustainable development goals, even though SDG 12 is most important thing, the other goals is also important. And 7, 8, 9, 11, 13 is also make an interconnection. You must think about that. Even though and SDG 12 is most important thing, if you develop to SDG 12, you must think the other one. And that is interconnection. Next one, please. So I'd like to mention about the waste management in Korea. And that is very important. In the class, in my lectures, every semester, I mention about the classification of waste in Korea, because those are very important to manage the waste and role and responsibility of waste. A waste is classified as household waste and industrial waste. The responsibility of household waste belongs to local authorities. Industrial waste belongs to manufacturers, producers, importers. So industrial waste also divide into general industrial waste, construction waste, and designated waste. We call the designated waste, but that is hazardous waste. So general industrial waste also divided into household waste from industrial sector, industrial waste from facilities. Those is also the same characteristic of household waste. Those are same go to the household waste. We called it's 91. That is code numbers. We decide the code number 6 digit. 91 is household waste. 51 is industrial waste, general industrial waste. 01 to 10 is designated waste. Using the 6 digits of waste code, we can identify what kind of waste. Next one, please. This is the generation of waste in Korea. This is the green one is the construction waste. From 2002 and 120,000 ton a day. 2019 is 220,000 ton a day. It's increased almost double. The red one is industrial waste from facilities. It's almost 100,000 ton. In 2002, it's more than 200,000 ton in between the 17 years. Also, this is the designated waste. It's almost 8,000 ton, increased to more than 15,000 ton. It's so almost double. But this is household waste. It's called the municipal solid waste. It's 2002 is almost 50,000 ton. But 2019, after 17 years, that is 57,000 ton. It's not increased very much compared to other waste because of the policy. We use volume-based collection fee system in the nationwide. Next, please. So this is the ratio of industrial waste to household waste. 2002 is 4.56, increased to 7.58. So that is the industrial is developed very much over 17 years. This is the household waste generated unit is the kilogram per capita per day. It's 104 in 2002. This is 109 2019. So it's it's up and down, but it's still similar to 1.0. So that is the reason the policy. The policy is very important, but it is not easy. Next one, please. So this is total generation of waste in 2019. 11.7% is household waste, only 11.7. Those responsibility belongs to local authorities. Everything else, general industrial waste, 40%, construction waste is 44.5%, designated waste is 3.1%. So today I'd like to mention about the 11.7% household waste. That is belongs to local authorities, and among household waste, 30% of household waste is food waste. So there are a lot of type of waste. It's so many type of waste. It is so difficult to control. So I just mentioned about this part today. Next one, please. So treatment of household waste in 2019, recycling is 60% because we are poor country for natural resources. I already mentioned about we make the R&D for 30 years. And this is increased so much, and landfill is decreased so much. It's 12.7%. Incineration is 26%. So today I'd like to mention about the recycling part, this one in Korea case. Next one, please. So sustainable practice. I already mentioned about the practice is important. So it's the small items, small scale is no problem. So specifically in developing countries, there are a lot of informal sectors. It's under control. So it's uncontrolled informal sectors. So that is the problem. But even though in that case, you can ask to producers, make a PRO, producer responsibility organization. They make something to the circular economy. Next one, please. In Korea, we have the resource circulation based on the 3 R's. And first one is reduce. That is a kind of regulation and laws. So we have the restriction on the single-use good. Sometimes we cannot use some single-use good. And restriction to overpacking. Also, waste charge system for containers for biocide and disposal diapers, cigarettes, something like that for 6 items. I already mentioned a volume-based waste fee system is working in nationwide. So that is the policy to reduce the waste. During the 13 years, the household waste is not increased very much. So we use the standard bag and stickers for large waste for reduction of waste generation per capita. So based on the volume-based waste fee system, you must dispose more. You must pay more. So using the standard bag. So it's a lot of people try to reduce the waste. For the reuse, we use the beverage container deposit system. If you return the bottles, glass bottles, you can return the money for this system. That is cleaning for reusing. With respect to recycling, we use the EPR system and eco assurance system. Eco assurance system is applied to all kind of e-waste. Right now in the regulation, there are 50 items and end-of-life vehicles. That eco assurance system is based on the EPR plus RoHS and plus WEEE in the EU. Also, the government support the recycling facilities and fostering recycling industries. Next one, please. So production and use, they generate. We applied volume-based waste fee system to municipal solid waste and household waste. Also, we applied this system to food waste using the standard bag. I already mentioned about the food waste is the 30% of household waste. So also we use the RFID system to collect the food waste separately. So this one is reduced the waste in the generation and discharge. We separate discharge 6 types of municipal solid waste. and glass, ferrous, plastic, paper, textile, and styrofoam, expanded polystyrene. In collection, they specified waste, battery, fluorescent lamp, other waste, using collection box separately. E-waste also collect the take-back system, also door-to-door system. And then we make the recycling and operation of public waste treatment facility on the local government. That is, I think, the more than 30 facilities in Korea. And including the food waste recycling facility also controlled, operated by local government. Some facility is operated by the local government. And nationwide, e-waste WEEE's recycling facilities is operated by PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization. In Korea, we have the 13 recycling facility of e-waste in nationwide. Next one, please. So we collect the 6 items separately in here. Some areas, some cities, you don't decide the date. Decide sometime Tuesday, every Tuesday, they collect these 6 items. And this one is food waste for RFID system. Start in 2010, and recycling items start in 1992. And using the card, this card, they identified and the address, and then open the lid. Next one, please. So food waste discharge of the RFID system. So they get the card from the office, and then they got the address on here. So they put the card on here, they recognize this address, and then open the door. And they throw out the food waste on here. The amount of food waste will be automatically measured, weighted when you dump the food waste. So this information is go to the send to the central servers. This amount is accumulate. This computer system is operate Korea Environmental Corporation. This data, based on this data, they make a cost. They make a bill to the consumers. So if they make a large amount of food waste, and this bill is large amount of money, they must pay. So this is the control of food waste in Korea. Next one, please. For e-waste, its collection is very important in e-waste. So consumer dispose the e-waste 3 ways. One is the take-back system. As you know, when you buy the new items, and for example, refrigerator, and new one they install, and they take out the old one, it's free. It is working by the PRO or producer directly. It is not depend on the brand name. Everything they can control, they can take out. If you did not buy anything, in that case, and you get the door-to-door system, you call to agency and make a reservation by the internet. So they decide the collection day, and then they make the recycling. Also, local government and take out the e-waste, but collection by the local government. Next one, please. So food waste recycling in facilities in Korea, the recycle to animal feed. This one is animal feed from the e-waste. Also the recycle to compost. This is fertilizer. Also using the anaerobic digestion to produce the biogas. That is the biogas is charger systems in here. So that is the sustainable practice to use to consumers. Next one, please. Also, e-waste nationwide, we have the 13 recycling centers. This one is recycling center, Seoul metropolitan areas, and collect the e-waste in refrigerator and washing machine, and finally they make this one is aluminum ingot. So that is the secondary raw materials to use industry. And this one is recycling center in Jeju Island. So that is collect the, this one is washing machine. So they destroy and dismantles everything, and then they collect the metals. This is aluminum, this one is copper from there. Next one, please. So I like to make a summary for that. In Korea, regulation and laws that induce resources circulation are being implemented to realize a circular economy. That is the sustainable practice based under the Framework Act on resources circulation, and based on the resource circulation in 3R, volume-based rate fee system starting in 1995, and restriction on single-use goods and over-packaging are working fine. EPR system is applied to packaging and product, and eco-assurance system is applied to e-waste and end-of-life vehicles. For sustainable practice of resources circulation, waste flow program, such as separate discharge, collection and recycling are conducted by local government and the producer, manufacturers, or importers. Segregation is very important in household waste, e-waste, one of the most important measures. Recycling of household waste and e-waste carried out by local government and producer respectively. So the role of producer is very important. But policy makers make a long-term master plan and the technical roadmaps depend on each countries. It should be established and promote to convert toward a circular economy society through resources circulation. Thank you. Thank you for your kind attention.
The situation from sort of from the initial idea of sort of dealing with the waste from household to the industry, and then now actually is looking about using. I imagine the circular economy has proposed or promoted tremendous opportunities for research and development and technology breakthroughs. So, if I may just venture to raise one question, of course, here we hear that circular economy, by imposing standards and regulatory requirements, might increase cost. So that seems to be one of the psychological barrier to move for the producers to move into this. Could you say a few words in terms from your research and observation? How do producers also benefit from this effort and also this type of partnership?
I already mentioned about this natural resources. Producer always want to resources, but consumer dispose separately, so they can carry it out to the secondary materials for resources. So that is the reason they can save the money for the resources. That is the reason. So
Okay.
that is benefit for the company side.
So that's a inbuilt financial incentive for them to,
Yeah.
to do good. Okay. I also have one question from the participants, and they are wondering, for some people, it's saying, let me just read it up. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question. Some people debate that personal use of resources does not have enough effect on SDGs in comparison to the corporation's practice and use of resources. And in your chart, I'm seeing that the household waste, that goes into, of course, we're not talking about, switching off the lights when you're not using it, not to waste water and all the other things. So I was wondering, taking the whole picture of household use of resources and generation of waste, as we heard from Professor Stau, it's also, a cost. So what do you say to Heba Ishmael in terms of, does it really matter for people to actually start thinking about circular economy and to conserve and reserve and reuse?
It is very important because we make the awareness to publics. Everybody working together, even though the small size of waste is I already mentioned segregation is very important. Is everyone dispose the waste is separately. So awareness and training from kindergarten to elementary school, they understand why they separate the waste from another waste. So all waste go to the is the volume-based waste fee system. That is go to the incinerator, go to the landfill site. But separated waste, they go to the recycling center. So that is the reason the everybody is working is very important. That is the role of and responsibility of consumer.
Okay, I have one more, question. Might be difficult, but I like to have a quick answer.
Okay.
From what your two lectures, I got a sense that circular economy is not really a one actor choice. Yeah. It's actually the total, territorial ecosystem somehow decided or moved as a collective to move into that. So if you think of many of other countries might not really have a stronger institution or sufficient know-how or technology to venture, what would you think would be the starting point based on the Korean experience?
The starting point is partnership. Partnership between the countries. It's the developing countries, they don't have the technology, they don't have the, it's the budget, they don't have money, they don't have technology, they don't have even though they're in a policy. So policymakers, they try to make something, but they don't have enough capacity. So they want to make the partnership between the countries and working together.
Well, thank you for a very to the point, answer. And we will treat this partnership question on the 5th day of this seminar. So I thank you very much for your very very informative, and also to some I think it was worthwhile to revisit in terms of your lecture, similar to Professor Stiles' lecture. We have the recording, so this is possible. That is one more question, which is very poignant, but I think I will reserve that to the panel, because it deals with the tension between the need for local response, but at the same time global policy coherence. So in terms of trying to deal with the SDG issue. So thank you very much, and I'd like
Okay,
to
thank you.
please stay with us, so we will
Okay.
have the last segment as a panel. The
Okay.
next, the last but not least, I would like to introduce Ms. Rosemary Casemiro from the Philippines. She is a researcher from the university, and let me read from the College of Public Administration and Disaster Management, Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology. I'm glad that we have her to come and to share with us the experience in terms of what's actually happening also in another Asian country, but also it's an island-rich country, many islands, so it makes the task of coherent action and sort of a collective action sometimes difficult and challenging. So now I want to invite Ms. Casimori to give her lecture and to reflect on what has been tried in the Philippines and some concrete examples. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us. I think you have not unmute yourself, so we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Thank you. At the bottom, there's if you can enlarge your screen so we can all see better.
Okay.
F5.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but now we miss your slides. Okay, it's coming. And hit F5. Great, works.
Okay. So after the comprehensive discussion of our previous panel members, allow me to share the experiences in the context of the Philippine settings. Okay, so experts say that a circular economy application has significant potentials to address climate change by reducing up to 3.6 billion tons of global carbon dioxide emissions per year. As discussed by our panel members a while ago, circular economy is gaining attention in many nations. So the concept of circular economy is also gaining greater attention in the Philippines at present. while there is no integrated framework like that of developed countries, there are numerous national policies and initiatives that link directly and indirectly to circular economy approaches, specifically for the sectors involved in food processing, building, and also in construction. So the concept is also integrated in or aligned with the Philippine Development Plan and also in the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan of the Philippines. Okay. So circular economy offers opportunities to improve the living conditions of the marginalized Filipino people or those whose income and financial capacity fall below the national poverty line. So with the poverty threshold of 10,481 pesos or approximately 215 US dollars per month for a family of 5 members. Okay. So this circular economy is also seen to be helpful in the management of waste products, in discouraging open burning slash system, in improving water and sanitation, especially now that many rivers and bodies of water are becoming more polluted because of the waste materials. And also, circular economy is expected to help in providing solutions for low-cost construction in informal settlements and also in disaster-stricken areas. Also, in the promotion of new income-generating activities through the use of organic materials in agriculture, production, food processing, and also biogas generation from use of crude oil, fossil fuels. Now we are venturing into clean sources of energy, hydroelectric, and also even water and salt. Yeah. Many scientists are experimenting nowadays to come up with cleaner sources of energy. And also, these systems support rural livelihoods. The engagement of the people in the community in the generation of cleaner energy, materials from waste products, even plastic sachets and tin cans are now used to generate materials for alternative livelihoods. Okay, so in the Philippines, while there is still no framework, a definite framework about circular economy, there are also initiatives initiated by professionals and partnership among agencies, private institutions, non-government organizations for climate resilience housing. So one of which is the base, bahay in the Philippines, meaning house, and then base, because the foundations of the structures or the buildings are made of bamboos. So bamboos are known for its characteristic of likened to resilience. When there are extreme winds and typhoons, they just sway. And bamboos are considered sturdy materials. So this initiative of cement bamboo frame technology aims to provide home to 10,000 Filipino families. So the climate resilience housing, the sustainable bamboo house technology in the Philippines has been providing climate resilience homes since 2014. So to give you a background, there are housing projects initiated or implemented in Sorsogon area in the Philippines, specifically the Don Jose Veringer Senior Bamboo Village and also the Rejoice Children's Village in Nasugbu, Batangas. So the reason for the establishment of this bamboo village in Sorsogon is that because the people living in the area are often affected by calamities and disasters. Whenever strong typhoons, whenever there are calamities, their houses are broken into pieces. Their houses are devastated. And even there are help or assistance coming from willing donors, the condition just repeats. So every time there are calamities, there are typhoons, their houses are devastated. But when the bamboo village was established in 2017, the village people reported that there are no damages in their houses. A good development for an area in the Philippines which is usually stricken or often affected by calamity. A good initiative that can be replicated in other areas in the country, especially that its location in the Pacific Ring of Fire makes it vulnerable to calamities, not only in typhoons, but also in fire, earthquake, landslides. So this climate resilience housing brings hope to the people, to the community. Another project in partnership with the CEMEX Philippines Foundation through its Build Education, Build Environment, Build Sustainability program was able to put up climate resilience housing in the Rejoice Children's Village in Nasugbu, Batangas. So because of bamboos that are typically found in many areas in the Philippines. So it is a reflection of the maximization of the resources, innovation in the use of materials, instead of buying steels, importing products. Now we can make use of our own product, indigenous material in the Philippines, which is equally sturdy. So a good development in the area of construction and building. Another one is the eco-bricks. Eco-bricks is an eco-friendly construction hollow blocks made of the plastic sachets and other non-recyclable waste. So the Philippines is also known for its sachet economy. Why sachet economy? Because people are fond of using sachets, and for practicality, people also repack or repackage larger product from containers into smaller ones. So social economy. And also there are researches conducted that there are more of these sachets, there are more of these waste products in the bodies of water. So household can contribute up to 99% of waste into the bodies of water. And also, these sachets are made of synthetic materials which are harmful to the environment and may contribute to climate change. And this move on the use of eco-bricks. So eco-bricks are manufactured using waste materials, plastics, cans, papers, so the usual solid waste. And now they are turned into bricks that may be used for the construction of houses. So eco bricks, unlike the usual bricks, resemble Lego blocks. So the plastic laminates at the bottom act as the insulator that locks out the heat passing through the normal hollow blocks. So making the eco bricks cooler and also more durable. So a community also in Plaridel, Bulacan, province in the Philippines, was able to build a daycare center by collecting and donating plastics to the Green Ants builders, the manufacturers of the eco bricks. With discounted eco bricks, the local government unit was able to save money, provide the learning facility for the kids. So the Green Ants builder, the started as an advocacy among friends in 2012 out of the motivation of the group of engineers and entrepreneurs to take up initiative to repurpose sachets and use single-use plastics to make structures. So this another initiative is the e-jeepney. So the Philippine government launched its public utility vehicle modernization plan that aims to curb pollution. So while it is debated that the jeepneys only take portion or contribute a little to the pollution or air pollution. But it is said that they pose risk when jeepneys are still on the roads and there are worn out parts and they are constructed or developed 15 years ago. So they pose risk to the commuters. That's why the government is also pushing for the modernization of the jeepneys. And the idea of having electronic jeepneys, rechargeable vehicles that uses clean energy. So in the early months of 2007, the Philippine Utility Vehicle Incorporated was born, headed by its president, Romel Juan. And the corporation laid down its aim to solve one of the Philippines' major problem, which is the obsolete jeepneys that put people at risk. And the first e-jeepney manufactured was called Darna, named after a Filipina superhero. So the units are powered by state-of-the-art rechargeable automotive battery that can be charged through ordinary outlets. Although comparatively, the traditional jeepneys can hold a maximum of 20 to 22 persons per unit, whereas the e-jeepneys can accommodate 16 people or weight of 14 tons.
I'm sorry, your voice was dropping, so could you get closer to the microphone? Thank you.
Okay. So the e-jeepneys in the Philippines are powered by state-of-the-art rechargeable automotive battery that can be charged through the use of ordinary outlets. So while the traditional jeepneys can hold a maximum of 20 to 22 persons per unit, the e-jeepneys can only accommodate 16 people or 14 tons. There are movements that opposes to the use of the e-jeepneys because of the cost, the capital required to own one. But the government is suggesting that such problem will only crop up during the initial implementation of the program, and that the government is willing to subsidize, although the subsidy can only be 5% of the total amount or cost of the unit, and that the jeepney operators need to pay for the monthly dues, or pay for the amount needed for them to own the e-jeepney. Okay, so takeaways from the practices and achievements of the Philippines when it comes to circular economy and the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Countries can initiate customizable solutions as reflected on the previous slides. The initiative came from the advocacies of private people who believe that there must be starters, that there is a need to change the mindset as well as the lifestyle of the people, that little efforts can turn into bigger ones, and that they are also bringing hope to other people, that the indigenous products, that indigenous materials that can be found in the Philippines can also be used for buildings, for the construction industry, and that those products and those materials can also compete with the commercial ones. It is like hitting two birds in one stone, advocating for alternative sources of energy using indigenous products, using resources that are readily accessible, and at the same time contributing to the goal, the SDG goal 12. So maximizing the or boosting the economy while at the same time protecting the environment. Okay, one thing that must be done is to strengthen community awareness on measures to prevent the further environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. It all starts with raising awareness, encouraging people that they can make a difference, that people's participation, that consultation with the local community will have great impact in making innovations, taking initiatives, and also in crafting relevant policies. Through such measures, the targets efficient use of natural resources, the chemical waste management, reduction of waste, recycling of products and reusing them, as well as sustainability of the initiatives, as well as sustainable procurement. Now that there are alternatives to commercial materials, countries can initiate customizable solutions. it is not only applicable to the Philippines, but can also be adopted by other countries, especially those that are experiencing the effects of climate change, areas which are frequently affected by typhoons and calamities. They can also initiate the same. So that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Rosemary Casimiro, for a very interesting presentation about some of the local practices. And also I thank you for bring back the link between the in the key things, key elements of the SDG 12 that connects to different aspects of with conserving our environment and also improving the whole living conditions within the ecosystem. I have one question from you. It's from Adiza Lamen Quendo. The question is to say that, could you share with us some constraints or difficulties or barriers to the promotion of this kind of house that you suggest, building on the bamboos or using the eco brick? So could you tell us some what you have seen and observed in terms of constraints of diffusing and or broad or universal deployment of these new construction materials?
Okay, so thank you for the question. The first one is, it is hard to convince people to venture in this kind of innovations when it comes to infrastructure materials. We cannot prevent them from thinking negatively, especially that houses are meant to be sturdy. And but positively, there are communities that believes in the initiatives. They themselves bring their household solid waste, the plastics, tin cans they see from the roads into the manufacturer of eco bricks. Yes, the first constraint is convincing local people from venturing or using such technology.
So,
And yes,
so you are saying that there is some perception challenge to be overcome.
yes. There is the need to negate the idea or the perception that the use of bamboo in building a house is like building a poor man's house. Rather, encourage them that bamboo is an efficient and effective alternative to high-cost commercial products.
Yeah, so I think what your answer just hit the challenge on the head, to introduce sort of a novel material rather than what we
Yes.
have seen as the concrete and cement or the sort of stone mason type of buildings, that people to accept the alternative, which could be very interesting. But how do you overcome this kind of issues? So maybe this can link to my follow-on question. As we have seen in many countries, and no exception in the Philippines, there are interesting local initiatives, and also proven to be, solving some of the wicked problems, such as induced by poverty, for example, because the numbers you gave in terms of the poverty line and the population. So obviously, many would not be able to have affordable housing. However, the eco bricks and the bamboo could offer alternatives to resolve this. So how do you see that some of these innovations have been already incorporated into the national development strategy, or as part of the national voluntary voluntary national report when they talk about the SDG progress.
Okay. So one measure is to ensure sustainability of any project or program implemented. There is also a question about can we sustain them? Are they in accordance with the globalization perspective? Well, to minimize the negative environmental impacts from consumption and production system, there is also a need for holistic approach. There must be complementation of resources, effective reduction of resource use. For any program or goal to be achieved or realized, it is important to involve all stakeholders, such as policymakers, industries, also resources, and the entire supply chain, including the producers of the products and also the final consumers. So engaging these stakeholders is possible through awareness raising, as I mentioned a while ago, and education on responsible production, sustainable consumption lifestyle. So it requires reform of mindset, reform of lifestyle, and partnership mechanisms.
Well, thank you for your answer. I agree with you, but I think behind that, one hears that is a need for a helping hand. Is the actually
Yes.
is the function and the active engagement of the state in this process. So I assume that as the Philippines are very active in this regard. So I assume that something at that level is also happening. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you for a very interesting and informative presentation. I would like to invite the other speakers, Professor Walter Stair and Professor Soon Hin Lee, to join us in a panel for a continued discussion on this regard. And I think probably the question about constraint and barrier would be a good place to start. It all sounds very good, when
Yes.
Korean government was able to get people and business together and to propose, to move along the trajectory of reduce, recycle, and reuse through the sort of waste management. And I think Professor Walter Stair, you have also seen many of such effort in Europe. However, I also saw a report that is looking at the circular economy, or sort of actively engaged in terms of reducing the continued use, increasing use of natural resources and reduce the potential environmental damage in Europe. There are also a lot of challenges. So could you sort of, join out in terms of this discussion and share a little bit in terms of what are the barriers that you see as meaningful to tackle, but at the same time to have greater impact?
Yes, thank
Professor
you,
Walter,
Mr.
please.
Chairman. The one domain that has been neglected so far in this whole circular economy discussion is behavioral sciences. And how do we motivate people that they see the circular economy or sustainable consumption production as something positive? The examples from the Philippines, I think, are very good. I love the electric jeepneys, because I've always used jeepneys as a an intelligent way of reusing, repairing, and upgrading the old military vehicles from the US Army. And now, but of course, it was always the problem with the diesel engines. Now, to transform them into e-jeepneys, I think, is an excellent idea. And of course, the collective taxis, what jeepneys are, is a very sustainable form of transport rather than having individual cars. So but the jeepneys are a long tradition in the Philippines. So people will not have a lot of obstacles in using the electric jeepneys instead of the diesel ones. The eco-brick, I have to look into it because I didn't quite understand what the sachet, what the plastic is, how it's integrated into the bricks. And of course, we all know the problem of nano or microplastics. So what happens if you demolish a house built with eco bricks? What then happens to the plastic in the bricks? Will it be set free into the environment? The third example, the cement bamboo frame technology, is again, I think, a very intelligent solution, because instead of using imported steel reinforcement bars, using bamboo, which is a very tough local material, to me seems a very intelligent solution. You talked about the resilience in housing. Of course, the Philippines have floods, but they also have earthquakes and volcanoes. And so therefore, using something local to give the concrete structures better resistance to earthquakes and floods, I think is very intelligent. So thank you very much for these three examples, which, first of all, they are local. They use local resources. They correspond to the local traditions and culture. But the problem with the cement bamboo frame technology is that, as you have mentioned, people may look at it as a second class or cheap technology. And that is an educational thing to explain to them that bamboo is, first of all, it's a very rapidly growing resource. It's almost a weed in many tropical countries, but it's a very solid, resistant, and adapted thing for constructions. You can also make scaffolding around, even for high-rise buildings, out of bamboo. So that's an educational thing to explain that bamboo is as efficient in this case as steel reinforcement bars. But thank you for the three examples, which I think are excellent in showing making the best use of the resources and stocks of resources that you have locally. Sorry,
I was wondering whether Professor Lee would also have some comments to share about barriers and constraints, because I think many developing countries are eager to move into these better forms of managing resources and the environment. Question is where to start and how to overcome the barriers.
Yeah, I already mentioned about my presentation. There is policymaker maker It's a long-term master plan and also technical roadmap of the nationwide. Also, in the public side is the awareness is very important. So they must dispose the waste and separately, and so they make some dispose things for recycling. But in developing countries, initially, I think the policymaker asked to producers and manufacturers, because they have the fund, they have the budget to develop to establish small size of producer responsibility organization. It's not kind of big, it's the small size and small area, and try to make the small items. For example, for e-waste, they collect just television, only one item. It is working fine, and they expand to second one, third one, fourth one. But they can try to do everything, but it is so difficult. They make some kind of demonstration project. That is very important. So I think the policymaker makes some kind of rules and responsibility for stakeholders. Also, they make the awareness for that.
I would like to follow up on your comment, both of your comments, with a question from the floor. The question is that saying that for decades we have been sort of debating and promoting, advocating the benefits of globalization. But today the circular economy seems to bring us back to more of a local solution and local, sort of intervention. How could policymakers, but also producers, of course, that to orient only to, to participate in such a way? Because, yesterday we also talked about global supply chain and global value chain. So countries, if they are in the global economy in an active manner, they find themselves as part of the process. So they do not have the full capacity or authority to intervene and say, I'm going to change. And then, we come to say, okay, maybe the regulatory body should do it. Okay, so, now we have this global review process, and we come together to talk about the national effort and national initiatives. And then we see that the SDG 12 actually is pretty hard to make progress. So we seem to be in between these two tensions. On the one hand is the global reality, and the other hand is the local practice, which has to be in place. Otherwise, we cannot really address the question that Walter, you're so elegantly called as behavior science issue. So what do you think? Three of you think about this. Of course, we don't have right answer, but we can discuss.
May I answer? There is a general trend today of intelligent decentralization. If you think about robots in manufacturing, 3D printing, local food production, microbreweries, micro bakeries. I'm not sure if this is worldwide, but at least in Europe, there already was a trend to intelligent decentralization before COVID, but COVID-19 has now shown that any business that depends on global supply chains is very hard up. The latest thing is that you can no longer find shipping containers because the containers are blocked in terrible places, and at the moment the global supply chains, not only for medical things, have broken down. or become very expensive. And so we start to see the advantages of a resilient local or regional supply structure. But the other thing which works against globalization, the idea of economy of scale through globalization was based on the fact that the work goes where the cheapest labor is. But now a lot of the productive work is done by robots. And the price of robots is the same in Korea or the US or Africa or Europe. So therefore, to minimize the costs in production, now you have to, you can no longer do it over the labor costs. So you can do it over the transport and risk management costs. And so now it's easy to transport digital data and to have local robots in every country to produce the same goods. So I think the technology is making it possible that the advantages, economic advantages of the globalization are disappearing, and more companies become decentralized in their even in their production. Mr. Reed, Professor Reed.
Okay, I got the globalization. We need a partnership. I already mentioned about the partnership between the countries, and so UNLSD make some kind of initiative to get a SDG 12 for some, it's the some subject. So that is the make the partnership and network to working together. Locally, is the developed countries, is advanced countries is, I think, the almost no problem. They got some kind of regulation and the registration and the Waste Management Act is working fine. But developing countries, they don't have the actual regulation. I studied the Asian countries, and only 17 countries in Asia have the regulation, registration, or act. So the other countries, they don't have any regulation for that. So they need some kind of regulation for that. So, and the public side, they try to make something, but it doesn't work very well. Because they need, I already asked to, asked to enterprise, the company side, they have the money. So if they make the act, they make a regulation, they support the budget, they support the fund from the government side. So that is the I mentioned about the policymakers make the long-term master plan for that. Also, and technical roadmaps for that. It takes so much time. For example, in China, it takes the takes the 4 phases. First phase is informal sector's dismantling. In that case, they don't have any regulation. And second phase is the coexistence. Informal sector and formal sector working together. And third phase is preparing for EPR systems. And fourth phase is implementation of EPR system. It takes more than 20 years. It is not easy. It should be working together. and policy side, public side, consumer side, company side. So the starting point is policy side. And then they ask to company side. The company side got the money, and company side is always and asking to government people for beneficiation. So company side get those a lot of beneficiation from the government side. I think it's the tax levy, it's the it's changed the land. In Korea, is that there are a lot of the beneficiation to the public side and to the company side if they participate in this partnership. In local size, small size. So that is the beneficiation to company side and beneficiation to consumer side. For example, in Korea right now, they collect the plastic bottle. One bottle is 1 penny in US dollars, US penny, 1 US penny for one bottle. But it's not big money, but elementary school students, they collect the plastic bottles. So they measure the number of bottles, and the agency give to the small money to the bank of students. So they collect the plastic bottles, the very, very clean. It's super clean size, grade. So it's directly used in the industry. No washing, anything. They just use that bottles. Something like that is a kind of, so I already emphasized the awareness in the public. So that is small thing is the working together. It's finally is go to the, so it is so difficult to change from the informal sectors to formal sectors. For example, in India, they make a regulation, but waste cannot destroy to the informal sectors under the law. So they just dispose, this one is to recycling center, to company, to government, local government, not destroy to informal sectors. So that is changes, try to small thing and step by step. It takes some time. Licia, you're muted.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, in terms of such kind of initiative, what do you think? Which government ministries do we have to talk to them? Are we talking to the Ministry of Environment, or economics, or manufacturing, or education? Where do we start talking so that they would actually kick in one policy that would promote, the sort of policy coherence between education, manufacturing, economics, and so on and so forth, and environment? Because that phenomenon is still very evident. Is this silo reaction, and most of people are under the shower and not willing to take a bath in the bathtub.
So major minister is Ministry of Environment.
Okay.
So
And
Ministry of Environment is major role.
A major role.
Responsibility.
Yeah, and they will start. Okay, what do you think, Walter?
Well, in companies, in business, you have to convince the chief executive officer. You have to convince the boss.
That's right.
And if he buys your idea, then he will impose it on his managers, even if they are reluctant. And I think in politics, it's very similar. You have to convince the top people, which is maybe the president or the prime minister, or this depends on the structure of the regional prime ministers or presidents. But you have to convince the boss that your ideas are credible and will help the environment and local industry and jobs. And then he will try to impose that on the silos. But I don't think it works the other way around. In many countries, if you convince the environment ministry, then the Minister of Economics will immediately say, this is a green idea. And it's about business. It's not about saving the environment. So the whole thing it's about saving society as a working society to prevent revolutions, prevent social upheaval, because even unemployment in any country, after a certain level, unemployed go to the streets. And at the moment, we have in many European and other countries social upheaval because of COVID-19. People don't want to wear masks. People don't want to get vaccinated. But nobody is selling the common good. The common good is to have a healthy society. So it doesn't matter if you like masks or vaccinations, but for the sake of the common good, you should accept this. And I think with sustainable consumption, I call it sustainable production and use, it's the same thing. If the top guy can convince people that this is for the common good of the province or of the nation, then they will probably buy it. And of course, you can give subsidies, you can all the usual tricks. But unfortunately, you have to convince the top guys in industry and in politics.
Yeah, I
Okay.
totally.
Yeah. Professor Lee, please.
Mhm. I
Very
totally
quick.
agree with Professor Walters, and that is the short way. But it's the top guy, it's a top level of people do not think about the environment very well. Just they think about the economics at first. That's the problem. So in Korea, is the Minister of Environment got the small money by the budget from the government and working together with the NGOs. And NGO working with the Minister of Environment, they a kind of movement. They reduce the waste. So that is we try to make the volume-based waste fee system. It's the nationwide. That is only one country got this kind of system in Korea. So that is reduce the household waste is dramatically.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That was a very good, interesting comment. And I would like to invite Rosemary, Ms. Casimiro. Do you have something that you want to add? Very quick, 1 minute.
Circular economy. First, we need the government policies that fosters innovation to advance circular solutions. In terms of the use of indigenous materials and indigenous products, there is still problem related to inadequate production capacity, low level of demand for indigenous building materials, Also, there are problems with the unavailability of the local experience of the production of such products or the use of such materials. And also that practitioners are also careful in using material that is hard to standardize, like the eco brick or the bamboo. So we need reinforcement from the policymakers. We also need to take partnerships to the next level. We need innovations in the area of public-private partnerships. Companies, investors, governments, civil society, all of them or each of them offer unique financial, intellectual, and operational assets that can be strategically deployed to solve the big problems. But the big problems that they cannot solve alone. So the key here is cooperation, partnership, working hand in hand, and also raising awareness on the use of
Okay.
alternatives. Yes.
Well, that's a good point, and I think that is really a nice way to summarize our discussion. I do want to end up on a positive note because it sounds like, oh, we know all these problems already. We're just coming back to the same place, so we're entitled to feel somehow a bit disempowered, and then let business as usual. And I think what we heard today is that there are many of experiences, examples of business unusual. And what needs to be done is to have these cases being take up by the upper disaggregate, upper level of either a local government or national government, or even a whole supply chain which cuts across the global spectrum. And at the same time that we know that it has been repeated by Professor Ri as well as later on the other speakers also mentioned, partnership will be the key. I think the partnership is not just about government, private sector, non-state actors like NGOs, but the community and the people. If we all taking responsibility to make sure that our common good environment, common resources, and common space of survival will be actually resilient and can survive and be left in a good shape to the future generation. I think we would be able to do it. So I wanted to advertise for the next two sessions. Tomorrow we will be dealing with public administration. How can we have the government to perform in such a way is supportive, and the Friday will be the looking at PPPs and financial investment. So with that note, I would like to thank you very much for joining us, to give us your time and your thoughts and your reflections, and look forward to seeing you again. And I will give the floor back to Dr. Aragon to conclude.
Thank you very much, Licia. I'd like to thank all the speakers, Professor Walter Stahl, Professor Emeritus, founder, director of the Product Life Institute, Professor Sun Ri, at the professor at the Gyeonggi University in the Republic of Korea, and I'd like to thank also Ms. Rosemary Casimiro, who's researcher at the College of Public Administration and Disaster Management, Nueva Ecija, at the University of Science and Technology in the Philippines. I must say, it was very interesting. I would say night for me, but the 2.5 hours we had, you brought very interesting perspectives and ideas. I think we could have spent 3-4 days on these themes. That was not enough. We didn't cover too much. I mean, all the spectrum around this, but I think that there was a really good discussion. The presentations were really good, and the discussion, as I mentioned, we could do more, but we only had 2.5 hours, 2 hours and a half, and then I think that was very successful. Thank you so much again for your to bring your insights into this the team that we had today on SDG 12, yeah, that was fantastic. I'd like to thank also our guide and moderator tonight, Ms. Licia Saneriou. I'm sorry I go very quickly because we don't have too much time. We went a bit beyond our 2.5 hours. So I'd like to thank all the participants for joining us and also for your questions and comments that were really pertinent. And I hope we did respond to your questions, but we will treat them also in the future. We'll read them, the ones that were not responded to, all of them anyway. We'll use them, and then we will have them in a report at the end of this 1 week, and we keep also this information for the future as well. I'd like to yes, as Licia told you, please tomorrow join us. We'll have this other session on SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. And again, I don't want to. I want to not to tell you about the wonderful staff at UNLSD and the interns are working very hard and late to make sure that those meetings are going smoothly, as you have seen tonight. You know, if it goes very smoothly, that's terrible because some way you don't feel that someone is behind. You don't see when there are problems. You say, oh, it must be, you know, people are not organized. But we have very a good team behind us to help, and then I think that's worth to give them again the kudos for them. And on this, I would like to say goodbye and see you tomorrow. Thank you very much to everyone.